The next example that we're going to look at is list files. Now, list files is very similar to print files, but instead of printing them all out, it essentially returns a list of all the files inside the given path. So let's think about this. Now remember, it's a file recursion problem, which means that we have two cases, if it's a file or if it's a folder. So if I write out list files of a path, if os.path.isdir of path equals false, looking at a folder, it's the base case. Otherwise, looking at a file, the first case is we're looking at a file. This case means that we're looking at a folder. It's the recursive case. So let's think about what we want to do. Now in the recursive case, I essentially want to build up a result list, and I want to get the list of all the files in each of the inner folders within me. So I'm going to say for file name in os.listdir of path. This means I'm going to look through all the different files inside of what my current folder. I'm going to make the recursive call list files on the new path, which is path plus slash plus file name. Now let's think about what this does. We're going to assume that the list files function works, which means that this should return me a list of everything inside the subdirectory. Now all the files inside the current path is just all the files in the subdirectories added together. So I can do result plus equals this list. Excuse me. So I'm going to add in the recursive call, and that should keep adding in all the files listed in the different subdirectories. So if we look at our sample files, this should basically give me a list with emergency.txt, a list containing all the files in folder A, a list containing all the files in folder B, and a list containing mirror text. If I combine these lists together, then I should basically get a list of everything inside of sample files. So we keep adding in results. We keep adding into results the lists of all the subfiles, so then at the end we can just return the results, because it should have the list of files for everything in the current directory. Now let's think about the base case. In the base case, it's asking me to list the files for a given file. Now this is pretty easy, because what is a list of all the files when I'm looking at a single file? It's just that file. So I just return a list containing the path. And this makes sense because in the base case, let's say that I call list files on a single file. It should just give me a list of that file. So let's see if this works. Print out list files of sample files. And just as expected, it gave me a list containing a bunch of different path names and basically all the different files inside of sample files. So remember, this works because we're essentially breaking it up into two cases, right? When it's a file and when it's a folder. If it's a folder, just get the lists of everything inside of it and combine those together. If it's a file, then just return a list containing that file. If you always think about recursion over file systems, like in this situation where it's either a file or a folder, then you should be able to break down the problem pretty easily, no matter how much harder it is.